Today, I'm going to show you part of my editing process on my work in progress. Here's what I've been working on in the Forgotten Scroll. So in chapter 6, you can see all my edits here. Basic edits I've done, and I'll just show you some of the things I'm doing, and hopefully it will give you some good ideas for your editing. Okay, so the first paragraph, a shiver ran down Mari's spine, and I had as there, and I replaced it with and. Because I didn't think she should be shivering as she's looking up to see the allergen. The allergen is this figure that tried to kill her the last time she was in the land. So she is understandably afraid of him. But in the previous chapter, they hear his voice. Okay, so she hears his voice before she sees him. So she's already shivering in fear because she heard his voice, and then she looks up to see him. So I just wanted those to be like two kind of separate things. And then the next sentence says, he must have eaten some of his magic cake, as he seemed at least twice the size as the last time she had seen him. I had when she had last seen him, and that felt a little formal for a children's book. So I tried to make the language a little less formal there. Here I took out a dialogue tag because it wasn't needed, because the whole paragraph is about the rabbit. The rabbit is eyeing her suspiciously, and then it says this is meaningless. The reader's going to understand that he's talking. I don't need to put a dialogue tag there, so I just took it out. You get down to this paragraph. Oh, you'd like that, wouldn't you? The rabbit grabbed a small bottle of his cider and drank it. Mari watched him shrink. And this sentence was all just like convoluted. It was technically grammatically correct, but I just felt like it was confusing. And I had shaking from the uncomfortableness of the business, but it wasn't clear who was shaking. I have a writers group, and someone in the writers group pointed that out to me. So I'm very thankful for that. So I just changed it to Mari watched him shrink and shake from the discomfort it caused him. So that's a little more clear that he is shrinking and shaking. It's a piece of pottery, Mari answered. She looked over her shoulder at Janine and Bobby, who were wisely hanging back from the rabbit. Janine shrugged her shoulders and made a face. Apparently, she wasn't going to step in and help. Mari glared at Janine, angry that it was all up to her to barter for their freedom. Okay, so I had originally just had a quick sentence there. It was up to Mari to continue bartering for their freedom, but it needed to be a little bit more specific to show what was in the character's head. So this whole chapter is from Mari's perspective. So we need to know why Mari is deciding it's all up to her, and also just give a little emotional insight there, show that she's angry at her sister for not helping because Janine's her older sister. So sometimes I just take out words like no or well or but at the beginning of the dialogue, because it's better if you can shorten it. So when we're actually talking, we will say, well, but, all that stuff, but you don't need to add those in. Those aren't important words. So basically my philosophy is, if it's not an important word, if it's not an important phrase in there, and you can say it in a shorter way and convey the same idea, then do it. Because especially if it's like an adventure story, like Fine, you want to keep the plot moving along. You don't need all this long dialogue. So again, I took out here, if you don't mind, all we want is to pass through. That's what Mari said. Now, most children aren't going to say that. They're not going to use all those words. So she said, we just want to pass through. That's a lot shorter, more concise, conveys the same exact idea. Down here, it was an Egyptian pyramid in the desert, Bobby offered. So I actually had to add this in. This was an important plot point. That Bobby would tell him that it was in the desert, because that becomes an origin point for the directions that they get later on. So if the rabbit doesn't know it's a pyramid in the desert in his land, in the magical land that he's in, then he's not going to know the origin point. So I just put in that clarification. His sisters both shook their heads at him. Here I wanted to give another clarification, not wanting to give away too much information too soon, because why are they shaking their heads at him? So I just wanted to explain that they're going, no, Bobby, don't tell him this. We don't want to. He's a bad guy, right? Bobby's not getting that. Instead of putting the rabbit looked up at the three of them in that paragraph, I stuck it down here that he's looking up at them as he's talking, so that it's all kind of one thing that he's asking them as he's looking at. At the start of the paragraph, you generally want to put the character's name. So I replaced he with the rabbit. That's more specific. Sometimes I call him the rabbit. Sometimes I call him the allergen, but it comes to the same thing. There's no other rabbit in the room. And then over here, I took out the rabbit and put he, because I've already mentioned that it was the rabbit. And so now I can just use pronouns for the rest of this paragraph and it's understood. I thought there was too many words in here. I had another book on his bookshelf and pulled it out. So I didn't need to mention the book twice. And also you don't go over to a book. You go over to the bookshelf. And then when you're at the bookshelf, you're reaching for a certain book. So I just kind of mixed up the order there and said, went over to his bookshelf and pulled out another book to simplify it, to make sure that the sequence there is logical and makes sense. So here is where I didn't give enough to show what's happening inside of Mari's head, because remember, it's from her perspective. And so I added some there. Mari could tell Janine had lost patience with the rabbit's elusive answers. Janine stepped forward and Mari knew she was about to take charge of the situation. Either let us go or tell us what you're talking about, she demanded. This might need a little bit more clarification to show that it's still Janine talking, but because it's all the same paragraph and Janine is talking and it's saying that she's about to take charge of this situation, I think from the context, the reader can probably understand that the she is Janine. All right, he agreed with a sly grin. And so I'm just kind of showing from Mari's perspective that she can tell that the rabbit is up to something. Mari shook her head. I just took that out because I've noticed that I put a lot of people shaking their heads. And it's like, people don't do this like all day long, right? They would get a neck cramp. If she's saying the word no, she doesn't also need to be shaking her head. And then I just put in Mari protested. Janine looked stunned and Mari shook her head, now seething. Why did Janine always have to take action without consulting Mari? Her rash actions had made things much worse for them. So I just did a lot of rewording here because I wanted to show more specifically what was going on between Janine and Mari, make sure that the reader knew why Mari is not happy at Janine. Mari avoided looking at Janine, holding back her anger so she wouldn't start a fight with her. They had to stay united against the allergen. Here I'm just showing in more inside Mari's head because this whole section wasn't here before. So it just kind of jumped around in between the action that was happening. And I wanted to really show in the scene how Mari's emotions are developing. Mari glanced at Bobby and saw he was looking around the cave, seemingly unaware of their predicament. I had just said Bobby was looking around the cave, but saying Mari glanced at Bobby feels like you're more in her perspective, even though it's third person. It's limited. It's a limited third person perspective. He held the blue stone near it to reveal the black curved letters. And so I gave a little more description here. I always like capitalize things like east and west that don't need to be capitalized. So the basic grammatical rule is you don't capitalize it unless it's like it's the North Sea, right? It's part of a specific geographical location. Here, I'm just talking about the compass directions. So it should all be lowercase. Down here, I put in an exclamation point and I put raising her voice to put a little more emphasis on Janine's objection. Mari looked up at Janine, widening her eyes and silently mouthing, "Be careful." I might end up changing this again because I don't really like that wording there. I just wanted to add some more about this secret communication between the siblings. While the bad guy is doing his thing, Janine and Mari are trying to communicate about the situation. Well, especially Mari. She's very concerned because her siblings don't seem to understand the danger that they're in as she does, because she was the one who was almost killed by this guy last time. Janine nodded at Mari behind the rabbit's back, okay, to show that she sees Mari's signal. Why say east twice in a row? Janine asked in a gentler tone. Okay, so Mari was like cautioning her, be careful, like, don't make this guy mad, right? So now that's why Janine's now talking in a gentler tone. I moved the dialogue tag from down here to up here because I liked breaking it up that way better. So, some of it is stylistic. Some of it just sounds better. It feels better. So I've already done all the grammar stuff. From a reader's perspective, how are they going to see this? How are they going to perceive the characters and the situation? Are they going to really understand the story the way that I'm wanting them to? Is the dialogue clear and concise? Is it conveying just what it needs to, but not too much? And then, are the descriptions accurate and are they needed? A lot of it is just like this example down here. Mari's mind raced as she tried to think of a middle ground. So now I'm showing her thought process. I had to do a lot in this chapter of getting more into Mari's character so I can show that to the reader, show more of what she's thinking and feeling. And I don't do too much of that because I don't want to slow it down too much. If you spend like long paragraphs, if you've ever read something like Crime and Punishment, that kind of literature will be like, it could be a whole chapter that takes place just in the character. For me, it's about striking a balance between, you've got the dialogue, you've got the interaction between the characters, you've got what's happening inside the character's mind. And so when I'm going back and doing some of my final editing, I'm really thinking about that. I'm really thinking about my characters and the whole atmosphere that I'm developing. So from here, after I finish all these edits, I'm going to be formatting my book, which I will do a video on, and I'll put it on Amazon. I'll order my author copy. Then I'll go through the author copy, the hard copy, because sometimes your eyes miss things, on the screen, and they'll catch them better in an actual printed copy of the book. And then I can see if the formatting works and everything, and I'll work out all the kinks before this story is officially ready in December. Very exciting. So I hope that's helpful to you in your editing, giving you some ideas or tips. And if you want to see more videos like this, or if you like this video, please give it a like. Please subscribe to my channel. I do a lot about writing and editing and publishing, especially self-publishing, and especially on Amazon. And I've researched a lot about all this stuff. And so I feel like I can offer some good, valuable advice. So, let me know if you have a question or you want me to do a video on a specific topic. I'd love to do that for you.